Just kidding. Hey everyone. I've had this topic on my mind for a little while. I've been feeling a bit nostalgic recently. Pretty nostalgic, actually. Specifically for my childhood from the late 90s and the early 2000s. Chances are, with a lot of the stuff I see online these days, I'm not the only person that feels this way. I think there's a lot of us feeling this right now as we get older and the world starts to kind of get a little more difficult, a little weirder to navigate, and things are pretty uncertain. I think a lot of us feel that desire to really retreat into the past, and I am myself guilty of this. But I still want to talk about something that I really like, and this nostalgic era I really enjoy. So I'm going to be a little bit self-indulgent and just talk about it for a little bit. Um, yeah, I'm just going to be talking about mainly like video games and I don't know, cartoons, toys, stuff. Anything you would have asked your parents for as a kid, I guess. Nothing, nothing too fancy, I guess. But yeah, I really like, honestly, despite how people feel, about this time, it's easy to make fun of a lot of the edgy stuff that came out. I kind of like the darker tone from some of the media that came out around this time. I don't know, it's fun. Like I don't know, the X Files, and although that's like early '90s, but I was watching some of that. It reminded me a little bit. X Files is like really great. How it can have these insane baddie concepts, but still try and maintain a serious tone, almost to a level that leaves you incredulous. But I still enjoy it. I don't know. I like. I almost like the writers taking these absurd concepts seriously, without a hint of much self awareness. It's really fun. I like in video games too from this time, excluding things that are just hilarious like Shadow the Hedgehog. But yeah, like video games from this time that would just deal with like dark concepts or dark reinventions of characters. Like American McGee's Alice is pretty cool. There's a lot of stuff. I like the dark lighting of this period. That's something that actually I probably differ from almost everyone on this, but I like how the sixth generation and like maybe some of the seventh generation consoles actually had like a darker color palette for a lot of things. It wasn't the brightest or the most eye catching. It actually, in many ways, was more muted or like more earthy tones, but I really like how it was often the worlds you were in to me, especially as a kid. That had such an impact. Was being in these kind of dark, ancient feeling worlds, like in Halo 2 especially. I loved exploring in Halo 2. I probably a large amount of my game was just exploring the levels and trying to figure things out, going through ancient alien ruins. I loved that experience, and that mystery was just something that went hand in hand with the design philosophy of that time, which was they didn't really, a lot of the time they didn't hold your hand or kind of prevent you. I mean, I was actually just playing Halo 2 recently, and it was so fun to just boundary break, just to get out of the levels and kind of explore them, and you find little Easter eggs or secrets, or just get a new view and kind of appreciate the depth the level designers went into to make these things. And you actually find they actually, there's a lot of things that they put in there for you to actually get if you're paying attention, or if you just have a curious mind. It's fun. So that's a great thing about it, the not the hand holding aspect. And I don't know, I look at art today, things are very colorful, things are very polished. There's a lot of polish, and there's a lot of stuff that isn't polished, it's rushed. But the stuff that is well done, it's very tight often. The people who do it very well in like the video game industry, they do it very well. And it's there's sometimes I think it's just too honestly, something can be a little too perfect or a little bit too self-aware for my tastes. Sometimes something is just formulated too well, and it kind of feels like it's not really taking a risk. And this era, it was like the early 2000s, late 90s, was definitely a very postmodern time in terms of thought. But I think sometimes, especially today, people get very self-aware of the art they're making, and it can be kind of crippling. That's like self-awareness is a very postmodern feature. But that kind of irony or that self-awareness, I think it becomes a poison at a certain point when you have too much of it. I think you need to have sort of a, I don't know about being naive. That is probably an extreme response to it, but you have to have some level of sincerity, and you have to try and get people invested without, keeping them at arm's length. If you're too self-aware or you have too much irony in things, I think it can just hold people. It can hold people aside and or just leave them kind of, incredulous or not wanting to interact or suspend disbelief. I know I felt that many times with many pieces of art or media these days, for sure. And this era is very creative, especially in like video games, and definitely like cartoons as well. Like things were so creative at this time. So many like wide ranges of influences. You take for granted some of the stuff that we see now in our cultural mainstays, but you forget that they were brand new attempts at the time. Um, I think about like even a show like SpongeBob. I mean, that's kind of funny to think about, like SpongeBob being something new or being like very creative and coming out of a vacuum. But when you look at it, it is kind of crazy that that show even got made, and just the wide cultural impact it had. And I often think about how it would be how you might perceive it differently if you had been alive at that time and had no context to it. People seeing it for the first time. Um, from my childhood, I remember Bionicle was big, and I was a massive fan. I was like obsessed with it. It was so much fun to just get all the action figures and to play with them. And what I think affected me more than anything was probably the marketing. The marketing was genius. It was really good. They really knew how to hook kids in. And I really liked the fact that it was not trying to appeal to a younger audience necessarily. It was for younger boys, generally boys from this time, from that like age range of, I don't know, probably like 8 to 12 or something, maybe a little younger, I'm not sure. But yeah, I was trying to like kind of target that demographic, but it did so in a way where it was sort of, I don't know, it made you want to be a part of it because it seemed more adult. There was something a bit darker to the tones and the media that was going on. It was great. I really loved the marketing. It had this great sense of mystery. You felt like you were dealing with like an ancient world, an ancient people. You wanted to learn everything. I really wanted to learn everything about the lore. I wanted to. I knew probably way more lore than any human ever should, and it's funny that people are still doing lore videos on it to this day. It shows how impactful it is, and they put a lot of effort into it, more so than you might expect for just a kid's toy, and it really paid off. People wanted something, kids wanted something a little more mature. They wanted something with a real sense of identity or something of interest. They didn't just want another cheap fluff product just thrown in their faces to just be thrown out the next year. People still really treasure their figures. I still have some, and I love them. They're great. And I think a lot of media and art from this time, it really pushed a lot of boundaries. It was a very creative time. People also had more money to do things because there hadn't really, the digital world was starting to take over, but people weren't really sure how to monetize it. They hadn't really figured out how to make money. And there were still a lot of conventional ways to get it. And companies were willing to take risks. I mean, I think about Microsoft. The Xbox is, it's one of my favorite consoles ever, the original Xbox specifically. And that people often think of it as, it got the image, of course, as like a frat bro, military shooter, FPS, gamer, stereotypical like Mountain Dew gamer console. That's really where that culture comes from. But unfortunately, it's too bad it's maligned as such because really Microsoft took a lot of risks on that console. They took a lot of risks and tried a lot of things. They made a ton of deals. Like they were trying to push it in Japan at one point with their own exclusives that they were making. They were trying to just, they had to force their way into the console market because they didn't really have a foothold. And they lost money on it, but they were smart because it paid off in the end. And it's easy to forget just how like risky it was. And it was only possible because at that time, they were willing to take a loss in order to sell, the system and their image. And companies just don't really do that today. They either don't have the money or the market's different. You can't make money selling video games anymore so much as you do DLC and other aesthetic add-ons or whatever. There's a bunch of other video game. There's a bunch of other things that you have to use in order to make money nowadays. There's different ways to monetize, especially with like advertising. But yeah, I really like this time frame. It's really great, and I think a lot of creative people should draw some influence from it. I think that we're starting to see that now. A lot of fringe genres had a lot of influence recently, like vaporwave. I think that might be starting to die off a little bit, in the retro like pixel graphics. That stuff will probably always be kind of popular, but I am looking forward to seeing what more creatives will do with this time frame, and I hope that they're inspired by, I guess, like the spirit of it more so than just aping or miming a lot of the graphics, or just, I don't know, just don't make it gimmicky, I guess. Don't make it a sort of gimmick where you're just copying one aspect of it, or you're trying to look exactly like something from the time. I really hope people kind of capture the zeitgeist or the feel or like the creative spirit of it. So yeah, please do it.